video is about the objectives of firms and will also give a short introduction to the market structures within which firms operate. Economic theory says that the key objective for any firm is going to be profit maximisation, and that would seem to be quite a sensible assumption to make. It's really why firms exist. First and foremost is going to be to achieve a profit and to try and generate as much profit as they possibly can. So in terms of identifying that point for a firm when their profit is going to be maximised, that will be achieved at the point where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. And that's a really important conclusion because it informs everything that we do in terms of our diagrams to show the position of firms and the output that they're likely to produce from now onwards. So you can see on this diagram, I've just put together a standard shaped average revenue, marginal revenue, and then marginal cost curve. And I've identified that point on the diagram at the point where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. That is the profit maximising output. Now the reason for that is because you can see that before that point, marginal cost is below marginal revenue. And by definition of what those two things mean, if the marginal revenue is higher than the marginal cost, the additional revenue that you will get from producing one extra unit is higher than the additional cost of producing that extra unit. It makes sense to produce that extra unit if you are looking to maximise and make more profit. So a firm will keep producing that extra unit, that extra unit, that extra unit until the marginal cost is equal to the marginal revenue. You go beyond that point, the marginal cost goes higher than the marginal revenue, then the additional cost of producing that extra unit is now higher than the additional revenue that you will receive from selling it. It doesn't make sense if you're maximising your profit to produce that extra unit. So that is why the profit maximising point is going to be at that point where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. You can then read that down, and so that's going to be the output, the quantity of output that is produced at profit maximisation. But you might be used to, in supply and demand analysis, reading off the point of equilibrium where the two meet, and that's going to be the price. You need to read up to the average revenue curve, which is the demand curve, and that is going to be the price that the firm charges, because that will be the price at which the market clears at that particular quantity of output. We might just now as well make a distinction between short run and long run profit maximisation. So short run profit maximisation assumes firms try to maximise profit for every single action that they take. So I think a good example to think about this is when Liverpool got to the Champions League final in football. They were playing in Madrid. Airlines and hotels, there are so many people who wanted to go and see that game. Airlines and hotels could really have charged whatever they wanted. They could have just kept putting that price up. And if they were only thinking about short run profit maximisation, they would just keep putting that price up and putting that price up. And actually that's what a lot of airlines and hotels actually did. But some might have thought a little bit more about long-term profit maximisation. So that assumes that actually sometimes you sacrifice profits in the short run in order to achieve better profits in the long run. So some of those hotels or airlines might have thought about the impact on loyalty in the future if fans felt that they'd been ripped off, maybe some negative PR and the impact of that if they put their prices just too high. So maybe they put their prices up a bit, but not by too much, because they might have been thinking about those long run implications. So moving now on to possible reasons why a firm might not pursue that objective of pure profit maximisation. And one of these is you might have a divorce of ownership from control. So when businesses are new, small, start-up businesses, they're generally owned and run by the same person. So the managers and the owners will be the same. And so they're generally then going to have that objective of maximising profits for their business which they've started up. But as a business grows, it very often becomes owned by a number of different shareholders and then controlled in terms of the day-to-day running of the business by managers. And what you're likely to get in that situation is what we call the principal agent problem, which is when you have the agent, who would be the manager in that situation, might start to make decisions which are not necessarily in the interests of the principal, who would be the owner. And so the owners, as we said, they're most likely to be motivated by pure profit maximisation, trying to get the maximum dividends they can and the biggest return from their investment into the company. But the managers might have a wide range of other objectives depending on their incentives, so they really might just be looking to maximise their own utility. And one really big possibility for them is they might pursue a policy of satisficing, which is where they aim for an easier life by doing just enough to keep the shareholders satisfied, but not really going out to try and make as much profits as they possibly can. And that's because a pure profit maximisation policy might involve managers having to take quite uncomfortable and challenging decisions. So they might have to look at making redundancies, maybe colleagues who they've worked with for quite a long time. It might be the best decision in the interest of profit to make them redundant, but actually they don't really want to do that. It might mean harder work for them and their staff who they're working with as well. So rather than profit maximising and doing those things, they aim for a policy of profit satisficing instead. A few other objectives that firms might have that might take them away from that profit maximisation objective might be trying to maximise their revenue. So that might be based on trying to improve their firm's reputation, maybe looking to expand a bit more, and they might therefore look to, instead of maximising profits, maximising their revenue. Now, in terms of the theory of the firm diagram, the point of revenue maximisation is going to be at this point here where marginal revenue is equal to 0. And the reason for that is because the marginal revenue is the additional revenue received from selling one extra unit of the good, and while that's positive, then you're getting a positive revenue from selling one extra unit of the good, and so that's going to be adding to total revenue, and total revenue is going to be increasing. Only when marginal revenue becomes negative is making and selling that extra unit going to actually end up reducing total revenue. So that's going to be the quantity of output where revenue is maximised. Slightly different to this, they might also look at a policy of sales maximisation. So that might sound like the same thing, but actually with sales maximisation, you're maximising the quantity that you're selling rather than the revenue from sales. And so I suppose if you were to look at that on the diagram, really it would be at this point here where the demand curve reaches the quantity axis. That would be the absolute maximum that you could sell. But actually it doesn't quite work like that, because you wouldn't exist as a firm if you were to do that, because essentially you'd just be giving away all of your output for free, which wouldn't be very sustainable. So we'd say that the sales maximisation point in reality would be at this point here, where average revenue is just covering average cost, or total revenue just covering total cost. Because if you go beyond that point, then you're not going to last too long in the market as a firm, because you're going to be loss making over that time. And finally, you might have some firms, believe it or not, that could be more concerned about social goals, possibly the environment as well, rather than pure financial goals looking at revenue and profit. So we talk about corporate social responsibility as being about the responsibilities of the firm morally, ethically, to society, and some firms place greater emphasis on this than others. So these firms, with their objectives, are going to operate within specific markets. In the next few videos, we're going to be looking at the 4 main types of market structures that we identify in economics and what we mean by each of these different types of market structures. We'll just finish here with a basic introduction to actually what it is that we mean by market structure generally. And so market structure is about the characteristics or features of a market within which that firm is operating. So just a few examples of the types of things that might refer to could be the number of firms operating in that market. So some markets have a huge number of firms all competing with each other, others have only one or two. The ease of entry, so some markets are very, very difficult for new firms to move into if they want to start selling products in that market. Others, it's much easier and more straightforward for new firms to set up. The control that firms have over price. So again, some markets, individual firms will make their own decisions and have a lot of control over the price that they set. And in others, firms just have to accept the going market price. And then finally here we've got the nature of the product. So the type of product that's being sold, how much differentiation there is between different firms' offerings and what different firms are selling. And so we use these characteristics to make judgments on the structure of the market that firms are operating in.